Now I would like to add a different type of selector. This is known as the wiggly selector. I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, and I'll type a new layer. I'll just call it wiggly. I'll change tools and position this in the middle a little bit. Now I'm going to expand the layer, and I'm going to add an animator for all transform properties. That means that I'm going to add an animator that is going to be for anchor point, position, scale, skew axis, rotation, and opacity. Furthermore, I'm going to add one more property, maybe a fill color for RGB. And I'll make this maybe totally black. And I'll make my characters totally white. So I'll go to the character panel, and there you go. Now I'm going to change these properties kind of randomly. Change the scale, the skew axis. I'm not even thinking about it too much. And of course the opacity. Finally, I'm going to add a wiggly selector. What that does is that it's going to give me random values between the default values of the text and the values to which I change the property to. In other words, I have animation without adding a single keyframe. Let's go ahead and preview this. It's animating all of the properties that are under the selector. The wiggly selector is controlled by many different properties, but I'd like to concentrate just on two: amount and wiggles per second. In other words, frequency, which is how many times per second the wiggle is occurring, and magnitude, which is how much of the effect it should get. Let me make this work area a little bit larger. If we start with a maximum amount of 0 and a minimum amount of 0, and we have it in there for a little bit, and then we keyframe, we move in time, and then we change these back to their default values, which were 100 and minus 100, what is going to happen is that our wiggle is not going to be effective until we get to the max and minimum amount of 100 and minus 100. Let's run preview. And there you go. The reason for that is because we're telling it to wiggle, but we're telling it to wiggle no amount. In other words, leave it at its default value. The second property that I would like to talk about is the wiggles per second. To have wiggle, it has to happen in a certain frequency, in a certain times per second. That's how it's measured. So the default is 2 times per second, but I can change this value to 14 or whatever. Look at the difference now. Or I can make it a lot slower by, say, 0.5, which means it's going to wiggle once every 2 seconds. The wiggly selector is very powerful. It's going to give you random values for your properties, but you can control how much randomness and also how many times per second is going to render these random values.